Are you new to color correction and grading, and you constantly find yourself struggling to get a nice looking image that really pops? Today I want to show you my super simple method of correcting and adding a nice look to your videos using only two tools that might be overlooked by a lot of beginners. And these tips and tools works pretty much the same across all editing softwares. Before we begin though, I put 3 bonus tips at the end of this video, so make sure to stick around and watch those and you might learn even more. First of all, I just want to say that this is a super oversimplified way of actually doing corrections or grading, and we're not going to do much grading today actually, to be honest. We're going to apply a creative look. But if you're a beginner, then this might be a super simple way to get going with some corrections and getting that look that you're after in a very, very easy and simple way. So let's take a look at this shot here and head over to the basic corrections. And these ones you'll find in pretty much any editing software. And they might have different names, but they pretty much all do the same. Personally, I'm not a big fan of using these ones that much, because if we take the shadows, for example, and we want to raise or lift the shadows, if you look at the image, you can see that these shadows are actually affecting the entire image, not just the darkest areas. And that kind of makes it difficult to adjust and dial in stuff very precisely. So my favorite tool is the curves, along with the scopes. And think of the scopes as the entire dynamic range of your camera or your image. It's not quite how you should read it, but it kind of helps you to grasp the function and the overall idea of the scopes, what they show. So 100 is pure white, 0 is pure black, and in the extremes there's no additional information. It's just pure black or pure white. And the curves over here, my favorite tool to use for corrections, because you can do so much with just this tool. So let me show you. I usually start by adding 3 nodes like this, and this area down here is the darker end of the image, and you got the midtones, the mid-levels, and you got the, yes, you guessed it, highlights. And if we take a look at this, we're touching black like this, so we could raise the black point just a wee bit, or we could bring it up all the way here, and then you see we've created this kind of washed out vintage look that a lot of kids like these days. But we're not going for that look now, so let's just put it somewhere over there, and you can see that we're not actually down on the actual 0 now, but we're taking the image pretty much as dark as we can without clipping. And now we can start adjusting this section here and lift some of the details in the darker areas like the trees and whatnot. Then we head over to this one and we start adding a bit more saturation. So I think this might be a good point to leave that node at. And if you look here now, there's a lot of room left, and this is something that a beginner might stop at this point, because they added, if you add much more, then you start to get that kind of ugly MTV look from the 90s, and we don't want that either, because that's not super cinematic. So let's pull it back around here and let's grab this one. And as you can see, there's still room to play with. And that's the good thing about using the scopes, because sometimes you think that you kind of pull the image as far as it could go. But if you take a look at the scopes, you can see that there's actually more room to fiddle around with. Of course, when you're working with 8-bit footage like this, you have to be mindful that sometimes you can create these artifacts called banding, where you see kind of different blocks of colors in a sky or a large uniformly colored area, and that's not good. So then you have to kind of dial back your corrections. But if we take a look at the before and the after, we've added a lot more details, and we've also added a lot more punch and color without even touching the saturation or the vibrance tool. Just been working with this, the curves tool, and these 3 nodes. And there's a lot more you can do with this tool. Let's head over to the blue one, because you've got all the RGB colors here. So let's bring down the blues like this, and all of a sudden it starts to look like we're in Mexico, at least according to Hollywood movies. But that's not the look we're going for, so let's put that back. And same thing goes for making something colder. You could either add some blue, but you see we're starting to clip here, so much easier to kind of go to the red one and remove some of the red, and all of a sudden we get this kind of cooler image. Same thing with the greens like this, if you want to go magenta. And of course you can affect just the shadows. I mean, it's so simple to do these kinds of corrections here, but let's go ahead and add a LUT instead, a finished creative look. And one of my favorite LUTs to use is the Sedona. And if you take a look at the LUTs here, you see that there's vlog for actual vlog, and then there's a log option for generic log profiles, and then there's a standard. And guess what? We're working with Rec 709 footage. We're not working on log footage here, so let's choose the standard one, and voila. I think this is pushing it a bit too far, and if we take a look at the scopes, we're kind of crushing some colors here, and yeah, overall in my personal taste it's just a bit too much. So what I like to do is I drag it down to 0, and then I gently start to bring it into to a level where I feel that it's actually looking quite nice. And that also depends on what kind of footage you're working with and the kind of overall tone. Some people might like this overly punchy look, and if you do, then that's fine too. So I'm quite happy with this. I think it looks pretty punchy and nice. So let's do a before and an after. So there we go, my super simple method of correcting and adding a nice look to your video. What do you guys think? Was it helpful? If so, make sure to leave a down below. And now for my 3 bonus tips. Tip number 1. Using a flat profile isn't necessarily going to give you the best results every time. In fact, there's some problems by using a flat profile, especially on a camera that shoots 8-bit video and don't have any LUT support. And the problems with using a flat profile can be that it might be very, very difficult in some situations to make sure that you're actually exposing your image correctly. Exposing, and also it could be very difficult to hit focus, especially if you're doing manual focus. Tip number 2, don't rush. Make sure to set aside enough time to make sure and control your exposure settings before you hit that record button. There's nothing worse than having over or severely underexposed footage to work with in post. Tip number 3, if I'm not shooting actual log, I prefer to use something like a neutral picture style. That still gives me enough control in post to tweak the final look of the video. And what you can do to give yourself a bit more margin is to go into the picture style and lower the in-camera sharpening and saturation. That way, in post, you can add back sharpening if it's needed. It's not always needed to be adding a lot of sharpening or saturation. And well, that's it. I hope you liked the video and found it useful and helpful. And I'll see you guys in the next one.